the greatest symbol of pain, became the greatest proof of love in history. The moment that seemed like defeat was, in fact, the greatest victory ever achieved. An innocent man, condemned, silenced, beaten, crucified. But the question is not, why did he die? The question is, why did he choose not to run? Because he could. He could stop everything. He could call angels. He could escape the cross. But he didn't. And what happened on that cross was not just an execution. It was a sacrifice, a plan, a surrender that would change the destiny of humanity forever. Asterisk, and maybe. You have never fully understood what really happened there. Until now, a night had fallen over Jerusalem, and the city still carried the echo of the Last Supper. Words had been spoken, promises made, but something in the air had changed. Asterisk, Jesus now walks to a familiar place, a Garden of Gethsemane, a place of prayer, of silence. But on that night, it would become a place of decision. Asterisk, he is not alone. His disciples are with him, simple men, Jews who left everything to follow him. They knew him as teacher, as Messiah, as the one who performed miracles. But they still did not understand what was about to happen. Asterisk, Jesus stops. The atmosphere shifts. There are no crowds, no miracles, no applause, only silence. Then he says something that reveals the weight of that moment. My soul is deeply sorrowful, even to death. Asterisk, for the first time, the anguish is exposed so intensely that it can almost be felt. The one who calmed storms now faces one within himself. Asterisk, he goes a little farther, falls with his face to the ground and prays. But this is not a common prayer. It is not about healing or provision. It is about suffering. Asterisk, Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me. Asterisk, this cup was not just physical pain. It was rejection. It was sin. It was the weight of all humanity upon one man. But then comes the decision that would change everything. Yet not as I will, but as you will. There, in the silence of the garden, the cross had already begun. Meanwhile, the disciples sleep. Fatigue overcame vigilance. And Jesus alone carries the beginning of the greatest sacrifice in history. Asterisk, the prayer intensifies. The Bible describes something rare and profound. His sweat became like drops of blood falling to the ground. Asterisk, the body feels. The soul feels. But the spirit decides. Asterisk, and then footsteps begin to echo in the distance. Lights cut through the darkness. Voices draw near. Asterisk, and among them, someone familiar. A night of prayer now turns into betrayal. Torches light up the darkness of the garden. The sound of footsteps approaches quickly. They are not pilgrims. They are soldiers. Temple guards, sent by the religious leaders of Israel. Men who saw Jesus not as the Messiah, but as a threat. Asterisk, and at the front of them is Judas. Asterisk, one of the 12. A man who walked with Jesus, heard his teachings, saw miracles with his own eyes. But now, he approaches with another purpose. Asterisk, the betrayal did not come from a distant enemy. It came from someone close. Judas had arranged a sign. The one he kissed would be Jesus. And then he approaches. Asterisk, Rabbi. The kiss happens, a gesture of affection, turned into betrayal. Asterisk, for a moment, everything seems to slow down, and Jesus responds with a question that echoes through time. Friend, is this why you have come? Asterisk, there is no shouting, no resistance, no escape, only surrender. The soldiers move forward and seize Jesus. The tension explodes. Peter, one of the disciples, reacts. He draws a sword and strikes one of the servants of the high priest. Asterisk, but Jesus intervenes. He did not come to fight that way. He touches the wounded man and heals him. Even in that moment, even while being arrested. Asterisk, this was not weakness. It was control. Asterisk, Jesus then says something that reveals the spiritual dimension of that moment. Asterisk, do you think I cannot call on my Father, and he will at once put at my disposal legions of angels? He could escape, but he would not. Asterisk, because this had to happen. Asterisk, the disciples are shaken. Fear takes over, and one by one, they flee. Asterisk, the group that once said they would never abandon Jesus now disappears into the darkness, and he is left alone, arrested, surrounded, in silence. Asterisk, the one who never sinned, is now taken like a criminal. Asterisk, and the night is only just beginning. Asterisk, the night still covers Jerusalem as Jesus is hurried away. There is no public trial, no transparency, only haste. A rush to condemn. Asterisk, he is taken to the religious leaders, men who knew the law, teachers of Israel, responsible for guiding the people about God. But on that night, justice gives way to self-interest. The goal was not to discover the truth. It was to find a reason to condemn him. Asterisk, false witnesses begin to appear. Distorted stories, weak accusations. Nothing holds. Even so, they persist. Asterisk, and Jesus remains silent. Asterisk, can you imagine that? Asterisk, to be falsely accused, holding all the truth, and still choosing not to defend yourself. Asterisk, the high priest then stands. The tension rises, and he asks the central question. Asterisk, tell us, are you the Christ, the Son of God? Asterisk, now the silence ends. Jesus answers clearly, and that answer changes everything. Asterisk, because by declaring who he was, he not only revealed his identity, but sealed his condemnation before those men. Asterisk, the high priest tears his robes, a gesture of religious outrage. Asterisk, blasphemy. The decision had already been made. Truth did not matter. Asterisk, justice did not matter. They wanted a conviction. But there was a problem. The Jewish leaders did not have the authority to execute anyone. So they take Jesus to the Roman government, to Pilate. Rome ruled Israel at that time. A powerful empire, political, strategic, and largely uninterested in the religious matters of the Jews. Asterisk, Pilate observes Jesus, questions him, analyzes. Asterisk, and something becomes clear. He sees no guilt in that man, no crime, no real threat. Asterisk, but outside. The crowd begins to pressure. Voices rise. Shouts grow louder. Asterisk, and what was once a trial now becomes a spectacle of manipulation. Pilate tries a way out. It was customary to release one prisoner at Passover. So he presents two options. Asterisk, Jesus, or Barabbas. Asterisk, Barabbas was known. A criminal, a rebel, violent. The choice seemed obvious, but the crowd, influenced by the religious leaders, shouts, asterisk, release Barabbas. And then comes the question that echoes to this day. What shall I do with Jesus who is called Christ? The answer comes as a collective cry, crucify him. Asterisk, the pressure increases. The atmosphere becomes tense, heavy. Pilate knew it was unjust, but he also knew he could lose control of the situation. Asterisk, and then he makes a decision. He washes his hands before the crowd, a symbolic act, but incapable of removing responsibility, and he hands Jesus over, the innocent, condemned, asterisk, justice, silenced, dot, asterisk, and now the path leads straight to suffering. Jesus is now in the hands of the Roman soldiers, asterisk, men trained for war, accustomed to violence, pain, and execution. For them, this was routine. Just another condemned man. Just another order to carry out. Asterisk, but this was not just another man. Asterisk, and yet, he is treated as if he were. They begin with the scourging. The Roman whip was not ordinary. Its ends carried pieces of bone and metal. Each strike did not only wound, it tore. The sound cuts through the air, and with every impact, the skin breaks. The body feels the weight of the violence, and Jesus remains, asterisk, without reacting, without resisting, dot, asterisk, not because he could not, but because he chose to endure. After the scourging comes the humiliation. Asterisk, the soldiers decide to mock him. Asterisk, if they said he was a king, then they would make a king. They'd place a scarlet robe on him. They weave a crown, but not of gold, of thorns, long, rigid, pressed against his head. Blood begins to flow. They place a piece of wood in his hand, like a scepter, and kneel before him, pretending reverence. Asterisk, hail, King of the Jews. Laughter, irony, contempt. They spit on him, they strike him, and repeat the mockery. Asterisk, the king. Being ridiculed, dot, asterisk, the creator. Being wounded by his creation. Asterisk, and perhaps the most striking thing, is the silence of Jesus. No aggressive response, no attempt to justify himself. Only surrender, asterisk, every blow, every wound, every humiliation was not just physical pain. It was part of the sacrifice. It was the price being paid. And meanwhile, the crowd watches, some indifferent, others curious, asterisk, few, understanding what was really happening. But this was not the end. It was only the beginning of the road. Asterisk, because now he would have to carry the cross. After all the violence, the soldiers placed the cross upon Jesus. Heavy, brutal, made for execution. It was not symbolic to them. It was an instrument of death. Asterisk, and now he must carry it. Asterisk, the streets of Jerusalem begin to fill. The city is alive because of Passover. Jews from many regions gathered, each with their own story, unaware that they were witnessing the most important moment in human history. Asterisk, Jesus begins to walk. Each step is slow. His body, already wounded from the scourging, can barely sustain the weight. The blood, the pain, the exhaustion, everything builds up. Asterisk, and still he continues, the cross on his back, silence in his eyes. Asterisk, the crowd around him reacts in different ways. Some mock, others watch in shock. Some women weep, and in the midst of it all, Jesus still finds the strength to look at them and say, asterisk, do not weep for me. Weep for yourselves and for your children. Asterisk, even while carrying the cross, he still teaches, but the body reaches its limit. At a certain moment, he falls, The cross weighs even heavier. The soldiers realize he may not make it to the place of execution. So they force a man coming from the countryside, Simon of Cyrene, to carry the cross. An ordinary man, who, without planning, becomes part of the story. The journey continues step by step until they reach the destination. A place called Golgotha, the place of the skull. There was no turning back. The walk ends, but the worst was yet to come. At Golgotha, everything is prepared. There is no ceremony, no honor, only execution. Jesus is placed on the cross. The soldiers begin the process. Nails are positioned. Hands pierced. Feet pierced. The sound of the hammer echoes. Dry, heavy, final. And then the cross is lifted. His body, already wounded, is now sustained by the very points of pain. Every breath requires effort. Every second is suffering. But even there, Jesus speaks, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing." While being crucified, he releases forgiveness. The crowd continues. Some mock. If you are the Son of God, come down from the cross. Others simply watch. The religious leaders observe, believing that this was the end. Above his head, an inscription is placed, "Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews." A truth, written as an accusation. Beside him, two criminals are also crucified. One of them joins in the mockery, but the other recognizes. He understands, and in the midst of pain, makes a simple request. Remember me when you come into your kingdom. And Jesus responds, "Today you will be with me in paradise." Even in his final moments, he saves. Time passes. The sky begins to change. The light fades. Darkness covers the land. Something supernatural is happening. And then, at the height of that moment, comes the deepest cry, my God, why have you forsaken me?" The weight now is not only physical, it is spiritual. It is the moment when the sin of the world is being carried. Silence. Heavy breathing. The end approaches. And then he declares, "It is finished." A pause. One last breath, and he gives up his spirit. Silence 1 to 2 seconds. At that moment, the earth shakes, rocks split apart, and in the temple, the veil that separated man from God is torn from top to bottom. Access is now open. What seemed like defeat. Was, in fact, fulfillment. The body of Jesus remains on the cross. Silence now dominates the scene. The crowd begins to disperse. Those who mocked fall silent. Those who doubted begin to feel the weight of what has happened. A Roman centurion, accustomed to death, looks at all of this and recognizes, truly, this was the Son of God. Even those who were not part of Israel perceive it. But for the disciples, it seemed like the end. The dreams they had built were now nailed to that cross. The Messiah they hoped for had died. Fear takes over. Hope seems to have been buried with him. And that is exactly what happens. A man named Joseph, from the town of Arimathea, a respected member among the Jews, someone who is waiting for the kingdom of God, takes a courageous step. He goes to Pilate and asks for the body of Jesus, with care. With respect, he takes the body down from the cross. There is no rush now, only pain, only silence. The body is wrapped in linen cloths, according to Jewish custom. Spices are prepared. Everything is done with honor, with reverence, with love. Jesus is placed in a new tomb, a tomb where no one had ever been laid before. A large stone is rolled in front of the entrance, closing, sealing, ending. In human eyes, that story. Guards are stationed. The watch is reinforced. No one could touch that body. No one could change that ending. It seemed final. It seemed finished. It seemed like defeat. But there was something they did not understand. The silence of that day was not absence. It was preparation. The darkness was not the end of the light. And death would not have the final word, because what seemed like the end of the story was actually about to become the greatest beginning of all. 3 days, that was all that stood between despair, and a miracle that would change everything.